The Stanley Cup Final is all tied up. Is it quickly becoming one for the ages? Plus, Connor Hellebuyck gets 2 NHL awards amongst the rest of the trophies and all-star accolades given out last night. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can find our show over on YouTube or wherever you subscribe to podcasts, so make sure you are to get the latest episode each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Gil, how are we doing this Friday?
We are doing really well. What a great series this has turned out to be. 4 games, 3 of them are going to overtime, one to double overtime. Comebacks, last-minute goals. What more can you ask for in a series?
Well, that's what makes it so interesting, right? Because, we've just finished game 4 last night. We're all tied up here. And, of course, I believe if you don't want this to go to 7 games, there is something wrong with you, I think, as a hockey fan.
9?
I know, seriously, except maybe condense the game schedule, but we'll get into that later in the show. But I think, this is definitely shaping up to be one of the all-timers in terms of the Stanley Cup Final. And even we talked about it prior to the series, and we're like, I don't know, it's a repeat of last year. Is that interesting? They certainly have found things to make it exciting and fun and different than last time around, right?
Yeah, and I think this series just has so many great elements. You have star power, you have physicality, you have goaltending issues, you have all kinds of drama and subplots going on within the confines of this series. And you know what? It's a rematch, okay. And is that on its face like, oh, wow, that's exciting? No, maybe not. But these are the 2 best teams right now. I don't think too many people would dispute that. And that's what you want in a Stanley Cup Final.
Right. And I think, when Florida goes up 3 goals last night, you just have to think, well, Edmonton's done. They're cooked.
Yeah.
It's over. And, they make the goalie change, which is, a whole thing. And then they just turn things around and just turn on this level that, we know they're capable of, but for some reason has a problem showing up in certain key instances. And lo and behold, like, they did it. I think they overcame something in last night's game that we really have not seen them do in the past.
Yeah, and to add to that, you overcome the 3-0 deficit, and then you overcome the fact that you let up a goal in the final seconds of regulation to send the game to overtime. You would think at that point that all the momentum would be with the Florida Panthers. They're at home. They just had this dramatic goal to tie the game. And no, in overtime, Edmonton regroups and Edmonton wins the game. And now they get home ice advantage back, and it's a best 2 out of 3.
Yeah, I think the goaltending switcheroo is one of the more interesting aspects of this Edmonton Oilers team, because their decisions on starting goaltenders throughout these playoffs has been, I think, a really sore point and a sticking point. And even, we had said at several points over the course of these playoffs, oh, Edmonton solved their goaltending problem. And then the next day, it was a disaster again, right? Yeah. And it's just been this huge roller coaster ride between Pickard and Skinner of who do you start for any particular game.
And you end up riding the hot hand. You end up, and you have to hope that they're both not cold at the same time. That's always the fundamental key, because you know, Florida has the all-star goalie in Bobrovsky, and Edmonton has two good goalies who are not as consistent, but who at any given game can play as well as anybody. So finding the hot hand is what the coaching staff in Edmonton has to do.
Right, and that's been one of the most difficult things in this entire playoffs is the Edmonton Oilers and who to put in net in
Yeah.
any given game, and I still don't think they know who to put in net for the next game here. I mean, there's the obvious answer of Pickard, but is it obvious? Time has shown, and the evidence has shown that that is not the case, and so I think it's still a difficult decision for them to make.
See, I think it's fairly obvious that Pickard starts the next game, but not necessarily that he finishes the next
I
game.
know.
And
I
so, and maybe that's good for both of these goalies because they realize they can be called on at any time. That redemption is just a bad game from the other guy away. And I think it keeps the team on their toes and gives them a chance. I mean, that goalie switch did help the momentum swing. And it's just very, very interesting. And then how about this? Talk to me about Leon Draisaitl becoming Mr. OT.
Yeah, that's what's incredible, I think, about this series and these playoffs in general is Leon Draisaitl kind of taking over the mantle where you would think Connor McDavid would be sitting firmly perched, and he is not.
No.
And I think that has been one of the other more interesting aspects of this series and the playoffs leading up to it.
Yeah. And, I think to an extent, Draisaitl is kind of Robin to McDavid's Batman in the perception of a lot of casual fans. And I think he's proving he's his own guy, and he is, overlooked a little bit by the media. Maybe it's because he's not from North America. Maybe it's because McDavid was so good so long growing up and in the spotlight. But for whatever reason, Draisaitl has demonstrated how good he is, McDavid or no McDavid.
Absolutely. And I think, we've been focusing a lot on Edmonton because they won the game and it was in such dramatic fashion, and they seem to be in the driver's seat heading, back home and going into game 5. But we do have to talk about the Florida Panthers, because how do you recover from a game like that, losing on home ice in overtime, blowing a 3-goal lead? To your point about, scoring in the waning seconds to tie it up to force overtime in the first place. Like, what do you do if you're the Florida Panthers?
Yeah, it's tough. And I think it's an issue. I mean, last year they were up in the series 3-0. It goes to game 7. Now, to their credit, they won game 7, so they were able to bounce back. But, last night they're up 3-0. Does Florida have an issue with taking their foot off the gas when they get ahead? Because this pattern, especially in the Cup Final against Edmonton, seems to be repeating itself in microcosm in game 4.
It is interesting because I think that that is absolutely something that's emerging as a pattern with this team. I think last year, you could overlook it, to your point, because they won a little bit, but it's becoming a little bit more apparent. And I think that one of the more interesting aspects of this phenomenon is, we have seen Florida play a little on the edge or a lot on the edge. Let's be honest about it. I was trying to be generous, but let's rip that Band-Aid off.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, they play a little rough and tumble. They definitely cross the line. Sometimes they get called for it. Sometimes they don't. People get frustrated with the officiating related to how Florida plays. And I wonder, like, how much of their game, which they are an extremely skilled team, right? They can do both.
Right.
How much of that skilled team goes away for the guys playing on the edge version of the Florida Panthers when things get desperate for them?
Yeah, which way do they turn first, right? I mean
Yeah.
and you know the amazing thing is, as you kind of alluded to, they can do both.
Yeah.
And they can do both within one game at different times or even at the same time. So I think that's part of what makes them so difficult to play against, but they can't take their foot off the gas.
Yeah, absolutely. I am just loving this series. I am very much looking forward to seeing what the atmosphere is like in game 5 and game 6, which we are now guaranteed. We will be talking a little bit more about that later in the show. But in the meantime, the NHL did, in fact, give out the rest of their regular season awards last night. We're going to get into that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost over, and every night still delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And hockey fans, you can use your knowledge of the NHL for FanDuel as well. Check out all the latest odds. And if you're new to FanDuel, this is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Again, FanDuel.com, place a $5 bet. And if your first $5 bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
So the big awards for the NHL regular season were handed out last night, and they continued their video series of having creative and fun ways to show how the awards were actually presented to the winners. And the big winner of the night, obviously, was Winnipeg Jets goaltender Connor Hellebuyck, who won not only the Vezina, which is an award he has won in the past, of course, but also the Hart Trophy this year for league MVP. And I think that is a combo. First off, I believe it's the 6th time that that's happened in NHL history. So it's happened before, but not a lot. And I think if there's anybody that's going to get that combo, it's going to be Connor Hellebuyck, right?
Yeah, and no question about it. Look, the Vezina, I think, was a given. I mean, yes, there were 2 other finalists, but I don't think they had all that much of a chance. But I think he deserved the Hart. And you know, the strange thing about it is by the time the awards get announced here in mid-June, Winnipeg's been eliminated. Hellebuyck struggled in the playoffs, and it just seems a little out of sync because the awards are voted on only based on what happened in the regular season. And Hellebuyck was clearly, I think, deserving of both awards, and yet it seems a little hollow now getting that award in June.
A little bit, but
little
I
bit.
do think, honestly, the video of him getting surprised really helped me kind of overcome that in some ways,
Yes.
because I think that when you think about the way that the Winnipeg Jets went out of these playoffs, that Hellebuyck might not be in the best of manner to receive these awards. Because he was literally out fishing. And so, you know, between golf and fishing, that's like the running joke about NHL players in the off season, that they're doing one of those 2 things. And of course, we got 2 videos, one golfing and one fishing for the in these presentations. But, you know, Hellebuyck's out fishing. His family surprises him with the Vezina. And then Eric Comrie comes running in last second with the Hart Trophy to be like, oh, we forgot the other trophy. It was very cute. It was very lovely. But I think that the way he received these awards led me to understand what they actually do mean. Regardless of how the playoffs turned out for him, these awards do mean something to him. And I think that's an important thing to show.
Absolutely. And like I said, he deserves both awards. I congratulate him on a great season and give a lot of credit. I mean, where would the Winnipeg Jets be without Connor Hellebuyck?
I think like wandering in the woods in a lot of ways. But I do want to point out that Leon Draisaitl, that we just talked about a lot, was the second place vote getter. And it was, I think, closer than you might have guessed. But I mean, Hellebuck was the clear winner, of course, when you look at the number of first place votes of 81 to 53. But the point totals were not as far apart as I might have guessed here. So, absolute kudos to Leon Draisaitl as well for a remarkable regular season that has now translated into the playoffs as well. In the goaltending voting, I would have guessed Vasilevsky would have been in second place, but literally I had to look up who might be in third, fourth, or fifth, because those are pretty much the two names that came to mind there. They also awarded the Lady Byng Trophy to Anze Kopitar. And I think, it's one of those awards that you're like, oh, that's really sweet and really nice. But I don't know. I don't know. As a fan, does it mean a lot? I don't know.
I like the Lady Byng, I have to say, because hockey is a physical game. It's a rough game, and this is the player that kind of rises above that fray. And, you're not going to win the Lady Byng playing on the fourth line, scoring 3 goals and 6 assists in a season. You've got to be, in addition to gentlemanly and all of that, you've got to produce on the ice. So, to me, someone who can rise above the fray enough to be successful without resorting to overly physical play. I think you got to give credit to that kind of player.
I think that's fair. And I think, Kopitar obviously is a longtime veteran, has been around for over a decade now in the game. And it does make me think, and especially looking at the voting for this award, what's the future of this award and who might win it? And you look kind of lower in the voting. Nick Suzuki sitting there in 5th place in the voting. Is he our future Lady Byng mainstay? Is a question that I have.
Very possible. Very possible. And look, the Lady Byng, it's not like there's a criteria where if you have the least number of penalty minutes, it's a reputation thing to a large extent. And that's why you're going to see, not that I don't think Kopitar deserved it, but you're going to see people win it repeatedly because it is largely a reputation thing.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's always like one of those awards that gets overlooked in a lot of ways, but I do see its value to a certain degree.
To a certain degree.
To a certain degree. The Norris Trophy was awarded earlier this week as well. And of course, that went to Cale Makar. He had 176 first place votes. Zach Werenski had 13. So pretty definitive voting there for the Norris Trophy for best defenseman.
Yeah, and again, deserved. I think Makar has just been so good for so long. We're not in Bobby Orr territory. What did he win? 7 or 8 in a row back in the day, but just very impressive. And I still think the NHL needs a defensive defenseman award because the Norris almost always goes to a defenseman who produces a lot of points.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I just don't know how you do it and parse that out. I think
you have the Selkie. You do it the same way. You have again, it's going to be reputational, but at the same time, that skill, I think, deserves to be recognized. You want to call it the Tim Horton Award, the Rod Langway Award, whatever player you want.
What do you get, a cup of coffee and a donut if you win the Tim Horton?
Bronzed, yes. You get a bronzed coffee cup and a donut. Yes. But
I mean,
I would like
honestly,
to see that.
it actually should be a bronzed orange traffic cone, I think. But
There you
but yeah, I mean, you do look at Cale Makar's achievement though, in all seriousness, and he's just an absolutely generational player at the position, and he's a finalist for the fifth time in 6 NHL seasons, and this is his second time winning it. He won it in 21-22, and Erik Karlsson has 3 of them and is kind of in the waning years of his career. I don't doubt that Makar will win another one and possibly more than that. I just think that there are very few like Cale Makar that can do what he does in the game and really change the nature of a game from the blue line. And so I do think it's important that that aspect of Makar's game gets recognized.
Absolutely. He deserved this award, and congratulations to him. And he is right now, I think, the best defenseman in the game.
Yeah, so we're going to talk more about Cale Makar and some of the other guys we've mentioned, plus some other names that are all-stars coming up next. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy, just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your next job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored job posts put your posting at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. When you have a new project that requires just the right hire to pull it off, the pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure that posting is seen by the right candidates right now. And you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On NHL. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. So, in addition to handing out those final regular season awards, the NHL announced their all-star team. So, the first all-star team, second all-star team, and the all-rookie team. And, you look at Cale Makar sitting there with the second place Norris vote winner, Zach Werenski, in the blue line position of the first team. Connor Hellebuyck, who we just talked about with the double award, gets the goaltending position. But I kind of want to talk a little bit about Nathan McKinnon as the center there over Leon Draisaitl, who's sitting on the second all-star team. And somehow that just does not sit right with me. It does not.
Well, look, McKinnon had 116 points this year. It's tough to argue with, his production. He's up there. I mean, he had more points than Draisaitl by a fairly large margin. Draisaitl had 106, although the 52 goals by Draisaitl are well above McKinnon. So, I mean, I think you can make an argument for McKinnon, but I totally understand where you're coming from with Draisaitl.
Right. I mean, Connor McDavid is nowhere on either of these all-star teams, by the way, but
right.
Which is a whole other thing in and of itself for supposedly the best player in the game. But getting back to the McKinnon Draisaitl aspect of the conversation, if you look at the voting here, Nathan McKinnon had 85 first place votes. Leon Draisaitl, 102. So Draisaitl actually got well over McKinnon in the number of first place votes for this all-star team selection. It's in the second place voting that the difference was made, because McKinnon gets 101 second place votes. Draisaitl gets 63. So that huge difference in the second place voting is what changes the outcome here. And I just feel like, not that Leon Draisaitl cares because he's in the Stanley Cup Final, and we just talked about him scoring 4 overtime winners in the playoffs and 2 in the final alone. And, the just desserts for him would be winning the Stanley Cup, of course. Like, there's no question there. But I just feel like this season was Leon Draisaitl's season. And to me, you put him on the first All-Star team over McKinnon.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, again, playoffs don't factor into this. It's all based only on the regular season. But it's got to be – and Draisaitl was ahead of McKinnon in the Hart Trophy voting as well. So there is – it's a close call. I think you can make a case for both. But with Draisaitl, with all those goals, I totally understand why he would be ahead of McKinnon under those circumstances.
Right. And so anyway, I know it's like small potatoes in the grand scheme of the NHL, but I firmly believe that Draisaitl deserves all of the things for this year. So,
I hear you.
I would love to have seen him be on that first All-Star team. And Nikita Kucherov, of course, over there on the right wing on the first All-Star team. And of course, with him getting 121 points on the season, if he wasn't there, I think anybody would argue that would have been a problem, right?
Yes, by far.
And then on the second All-Star team joining Draisaitl, we have Brandon Hegel on the left wing, David Pastrnak on the right wing, which is like, I don't disagree with that at all. I just think it's just a very weird season for the Bruins, and his individual performance is absolutely one of the bright spots of that team's season for sure.
Yeah, Boston obviously struggled. They're in a rebuilding mode right now, but pasta was pasta.
Right. And then when you look at these two teams combined, so you had Kucherov on the first All-Star team, and then you have Hegel, Victor Hedman, and of course the second place in the Vezina Trophy voting, Andrei Vasilevsky as the goaltender. That's 4 Tampa Bay Lightning between these two teams, and they are not in the Stanley Cup Final. That's kind of wild too.
And no Florida Panthers on the first or second team.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it is a very interesting dynamic between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers as far as Florida hockey and what do you define as success in the NHL.
I think it's also interesting that there are no Florida Panthers and only one Edmonton Oiler on this list.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that say about individual achievement versus team achievement?
Yeah, I know. It's a really interesting thing that, and we've talked about this before, and it's like a commonly held belief that regular season hockey and playoff hockey are 2 completely different sports. And I absolutely think that something like this shows why that's true in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it does. And, there are teams that are built to win in the regular season, and there are teams that are built to win in the playoffs. What place in the standings did the Oilers and Panthers finish in their respective divisions?
Yeah, so the Panthers finished 3rd in the Eastern Conference in the Atlantic, and
Edmonton was
Oilers
in the Pacific.
Yeah. And not a ton of individual accolades there. So it is a very interesting point there between the regular season and the playoffs. The one remaining player we haven't talked about is Quinn Hughes, who is the other defenseman on the second All-Star team. The all-rookie All-Star team came out as well, and none of these guys, of course, made the main All-Star team list, which we've seen that overlap happen in the past here, but you look at the all-rookie, of course, Macklin Celebrini is on that list at the top of it, winning the Calder. And then Dustin Wolf is in net. And the other 2 forwards are, of course, Matvei Michkov of the Philadelphia Flyers and Cutter Gauthier of the Anaheim Ducks, who was also drafted by the Flyers, let's say. But we saw how that turned out there. And then on the blue line, Lane Hudson did win the Calder. I
Right.
should correct that.
Right.
But Macklin Celebrini, a very good season, very well deserved being on that all rookie team. And then Denton Mateychuk, a defenseman for the Columbus Blue Jackets, who had I think a quietly strong season in Columbus.
And here's the thing I love about the all rookie team. None of the teams made the playoffs that these players played for. So this is like the up and coming players are all on teams that were on the outside looking in, and it gives them a little bit of hope going forward.
Yeah, as well it should be. In theory, if the draft and the lottery is doing its job correctly,
right,
that's how it should be.
Exactly.
So we shall see what guys from this upcoming draft may or may not be on this list next season. In the meantime, Saturday night is game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. Should be a barn burner for sure. Tuesday night will be game 6. That one is locked down. And if there is a game 7, as we are all hoping, wishing, and dreaming for, that will be next Friday. So we will preview that on next Friday's show. Gil, you'll be back on Monday to talk to hosts from around the Locked On NHL network about what's going on with their teams. And of course, we will have an all-new Locked On NHL game night, which is every game, every night, until that Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL game night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.